I am going on a journey this October. I'm going to put these down because they weigh a ton. Hi. I have always wanted to read the Walking Dead graphic novel series. I have watched a good portion of the show. My sister and I started watching it maybe 5 or 6 seasons in is when we started at the beginning though, and we binged a ton of the series. And I never read the graphic novels. And then my sister and I kind of fell off watching the show. After a certain point, it felt like the writers of the show didn't know where they were going. So we kind of stopped. It was always kind of weird. Just we had these journeys that we had been on with these characters, and we just stopped because it wasn't good anymore. We didn't really want to continue to the end because it just felt like the writers had lost their way. And we heard from people that it didn't get better, people who did continue watching the series. And so it was so weird having these characters and just dropping off their stories in the middle and not going back to it. And so I thought, after doing some research on Reddit on whether or not this series was finished and whether or not it was any good, so I decided to take on a challenge. With it being October, I thought it would be the perfect time to do this and read through the whole series, just kind of binge it all in one go. And I'm so excited. So, spoiler, I am starting this in September because I don't know for sure that I will have enough time to get through all of these in October. So I am going to be starting a little bit early. I have the compendiums 2 through 4, and then I have volumes 1 through 8 minus volume 3, which is unfortunate. Like, if I was missing volume 30 something, it would be fine. I had time. I'm missing volume 3, and I can't get it digitally. Compendium 1 was checked out from my library and was supposed to be turned back in a month ago, so I'm assuming it's either lost or someone just took it and hasn't brought it back, or it got damaged. I'm not sure, but it hasn't been back. And then the individual volume 3, isn't due back at the library for another couple weeks. So I'm kind of fighting the library system here, but I will be reading the first 2 volumes in September at least, and then maybe in October I'll need to start reading the next ones. Hopefully people will return the books so I can get them. So I wanted to do a little update because I am about halfway through the first volume. And I am just falling in love with this series all over again. I should say, before I get too far into this, I will be spoiling the TV show and the series, the graphic novel series, in this video. So if you are not wanting spoilers, I would suggest maybe not watching, because I want to be able to talk about the books, how they compare to the show, and I want to discuss what's happening because I love them so much. So we're halfway through. I'll give just a brief, I won't spoil anything in this section. If you haven't heard of The Walking Dead and want to know what it's about, I'm not going to spoil anything currently. It'll be just the first half or so of the first volume. So this story opens up with Rick. He is a police officer, and he is out. There's this incident. He's out with his partner, Shane, and he gets shot. He goes into a coma and wakes up about a month later in an abandoned hospital. And there are zombies everywhere, and there aren't nurses or doctors. Like, there aren't living people around to tell him what's going on. There are these corpses attacking him. He's not sure what's going on. He doesn't, obviously your first reaction is not, oh, these are undead people. So he's just freaking out, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to figure out where his family is, because his boy and his wife are not there with him. It's just him in a hospital full of zombies. And it's such a great opening. I think it really kind of gets away with not having to do the setup of a zombie movie or story of the first bite victim, and then the news is like, what's this new disease that's going on? It kind of gets to skip all over that because it's been a month. The majority of people have been turned into zombies, especially in this area, which I want to say is Atlanta, if I'm remembering correctly. So you have Rick just trying to get out of the hospital alive now, and he comes across this boy, Glenn, who basically helps him get out of the city. And when he gets out of the city, the boy, Glenn, is like, I'm going to take you to a camp where we can be safe. You obviously don't know what's going on. And he's like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. And he ends up finding his wife and his son there, and his partner, Shane. And where we just left off is that one of the old men who's there at the camp with them has basically said, Shane wants to get with your wife and he's not happy that you're alive. So I'm so excited to be going on this journey. It's bringing back good memories of the show, and I'm excited to see how it differs and just see how this goes. I think it's a really interesting series. At the very beginning, Robert Kirkman, the creator and writer, he did this little introduction, and he talked about how he doesn't want this to be a horror novel where you're scared of the zombies. His goal is to make it so that you're scared of the people and the things that they do to protect themselves and make a life for themselves in this world. And I think in the show that is done so extremely well in so many seasons. And I'm excited to see where he takes it in the graphic novels. I hope you'll continue watching, and we will see how I feel after reading some more. Wanted to pop in with a little update on Volume 1. Sorry, it's backwards. I have the front-facing camera on. So I am almost done with it. I just have a teeny bit left, and I wanted to update because we have now met some of the main cast of characters. So we have Rick and his wife Lori and his son Carl. We have Shane, who is Rick's partner, and then we have a few other people. So we have Amy and Andrea. They are two women. Amy was going to college and Andrea was driving her back. Then we have Donna and her twin boys and her husband. And Donna is kind of in everyone's business. She's kind of a terrible character. I don't really know why she's written the way she is. It seems very unrealistic. Like, she's very judgy about everyone and what they're doing, and she's really annoying. And then there's an old man named Dale, and then there's Glenn, who's like the young kid in like his 20s who's like really good at going into the city getting supplies. And then there's Carol, who is a show favorite for me, so I'm going to be interested to see what she's like in the comics. She is with her young daughter, and she is out of an abusive relationship. She got away from her husband when he died and is still kind of dealing with the fact that she was in an abusive relationship. She's a very subdued, quiet woman. So one of the things that's really bothering me is the way the women characters are being written. There's Andrea, who's like too cool for school girl. She's just like one of the guys. She can shoot so well, but she has no character at all. And then there's Donna, who's terrible because she's just like in everyone's business. And then there's Lori, who is just kind of like a wet mop. Like, Rick just says he's going to do something. He puts himself in danger. And Lori's like, no, please don't do that. I just got you back. And she's just kind of, she doesn't seem like she's being realistic about it. But then Rick will also just be like, I'm giving our son a gun because he needs it. And she's like, I don't think that's safe. And he's like, well, he needs it. And then the zombies attack the camp, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I was mad at you. I shouldn't have been mad at you. If you would have died, I would have been so sad. And it's like, he's just unilaterally making decisions that's putting your child in danger. Like, she has every right to be upset at Rick for just usurping her role as a parent and just saying that what he wants to happen will happen. So, interesting how kind of not loving the female characters. I feel like they're a little one note, and most of them are fairly annoying, which is kind of sad. So I'm going to be interested to see how they go. Like I said, Carol is probably my favorite character in the show, so I'm interested to see where her character will go. I am here with an update. I have now finished volumes 1 and 2, and I want to give some updates. I tabbed some things that I wanted to talk about. So, something important that happened at the end of volume 1 is that we find out that Shane was in love with Lori, Rick's wife, and now that Rick is back, Shane is sort of going crazy with jealousy, and he freaks out and basically tries to kill Rick. So then Rick and Shane are kind of at this standoff, and then Carl, who now has a gun, shoots and kills Rick. So that's kind of the end of volume 1. There was a zombie attack, and Amy, Andrea's younger sister, died. So we've lost a couple people already in the first volume. And it's interesting because this is moving much faster than the show ever did. So in this volume, they move out. Rick has kind of become the unofficial leader. Dale just kind of tells everyone, Rick is our leader, which, I don't know, it didn't really make much sense, but it's what happened. They need to find a place to live. They can't just live in the RV forever, so they're going to do that. So they're doing a lot of hunting, trying to provide food for themselves, and they're out hunting, and Carl gets shot. He is alive, but the man who shot him says, we need to take him back to the farm. Please don't kill me. My neighbor is there, and he's a veterinarian. He can help. So they take him to the farm, and Herschel is there, and his family, and then 2 neighbors that they took in. And Herschel is a vet. He's able to patch up Carl. Carl is okay. He's healing. So we have Carol's daughter, Sophie, and, like, there's this really weird scene in here where she's, like, coming in and checking in on him because he got shot, and he's like, I'll probably have a really big scar, and she's like, scars are sexy, and he's like, you don't know what that means, and she was like, you don't know either, and then she, like, kisses him on the cheek, and then the parents are making comments like, we're gonna have to watch out for them when they're a few years older, and I'm like, they're 7. Like, why are we having this conversation? They are 7. They are first graders. Like, I taught first graders, and that's just not what they're like. So, I don't know. Like, Sophie would be scared out of her mind. A boy just got shot and almost died. So, I don't know what that's about. And then a few pages later, we have Maggie, who is Herschel's 19-year-old daughter, and Glenn, who decide that they are in love in, like, a page. They want to sleep together. It starts off by Glenn being upset that Carol likes this guy, Tyrese, who, like, joined the group with his daughter and her boyfriend a little while ago. And he's like, oh man, I kind of wanted to get with Carol. And Maggie's like, why? And he's like, I don't know, everyone's pairing off. If I don't get a woman, I won't. I'll just end up alone. Some of these things are so bad. So then she's like, well, you can be with me. Herschel gets upset. He thinks that the zombies should not be killed. He says that they're people and they should try to save them. Like, he's kind of taking that doctor route, which I think is interesting. So he's been hiding zombies in the barn. So a zombie comes wandering by. They try to put him in the barn. One of the zombies breaks out, almost bites Herschel. Herschel's son and oldest daughter end up getting bit and die. Herschel almost gets bit. They end up killing all the zombies. Herschel's kind of like, what was I thinking keeping these zombies like that? He just starts to get kind of mad at Rick. Rick wants Herschel to let them all live in the house, and he's like, no, those are my son's room. He basically kicks him out, and Glenn decides to stay with Maggie. Tyrese's daughter and boyfriend, they're finally given guns to like protect themselves, and there was like a moment where it seemed like they were maybe going to kill themselves, like a little suicide pact, and they end by coming to this prison compound that they think is going to be their new home, because there's going to be, it's fortified, it has a fence around it, there aren't that many zombies inside of it. So they think that's where they're gonna stay. And so this is moving very quick. Like, I want to say the farm is like a whole season in the show. And so blasting through it in one volume, because like these volumes are not that big, was wild. All right, volume 3 down. A lot happened in this volume. Things are moving so incredibly fast. Lori, at the beginning of this, she is pregnant. She's very depressed about it. Clearly, she's just nervous about having a baby in the zombie apocalypse. Carol and Tyrese are a couple now, and Carol has like no personality and no page time. Like, I don't even know what she was like, other than she had an abusive husband before. Now she likes Tyrese because he was around. Like, there's no development of her character at all, which is very interesting because during the prison scenes in the show, she had tons of character development. One other thing that's interesting is in the show, Sophie, her daughter, dies very early, and her daughter's still alive in this one. So, I don't know, like, she just, there's nothing to say about her because she has no personality. It's weird. And they're basically out of food, so they're going into the prison hoping that there's food stores. They come across these 4 inmates, and they decide to somewhat trust them, though the inmates are as distrustful of them. Rick goes back to the farm, brings the farm crew, so Maggie and Glenn and Herschel and the 3 daughters and 1 or 2 sons that are still alive. There's a lot of people in this volume. They bring them all back there because Rick is going, we need a farmer who has supplies, who can like teach us how to farm so that we can have food for ourselves, because the canned food will run out eventually. We need to know how to sustain ourselves indefinitely. Then Tyrese's daughter and her boyfriend, they have a suicide pact where they're going to shoot each other at the same time, but he shoots her first, and she doesn't get the shot off, and so Tyrese comes in, realizes what happens, kills the boyfriend. Rick goes and lies about it to everyone, says, oh, they killed themselves, they were both zombies, and Tyrese is taking care of it. So we're starting to see Rick, like, his morality is kind of sliding. Like, he's seeing a lot of terrible things, and he's kind of just deciding what truths he's letting people in on and which ones he isn't. So then 2 of Herschel's young girls get murdered, and Andrea almost gets murdered by one of the inmates. Rick, basically, he finds out about this. They catch the guy because he was chasing after Andrea, and Rick just says, if you kill someone, we're gonna kill you. And Lori is like, are we? Like, is that how we do things? Like, we have other options. We could let him loose, send him out with the zombies, and he can try to live. We could lock him up. We're in a prison. Like, we have options. And Rick is like, nope, death is the only answer. You kill one of us, we kill you. And I feel like that's going to kind of set the tone for a little bit of the next part of the series is that kind of Rick towing that line of like, you have good intentions, but that doesn't mean you're doing the right thing, and you have been put in charge of this group, sort of, but you are not the ruler of this new world, but he wants to be. So they end up killing that guy. Laurie kind of comes around and just says, I'm sorry, it was the hormones. I agree with you. It's so terrible how most of the women are written. Andrea is still hooking up with the older guy, Dale, and Dale is like, I'm thinking about leaving, and Andrea's like, I don't really want to leave, but I'll follow you wherever you want to go. The other inmates basically broke into a cell block and got riot gear and shotguns from where the police officers used to store them. And they bring out the guns and they're like, you need to leave. You have overstayed your welcome. We are kicking you out. I'm hoping that the characters get more time to like develop, and that some of these characters like Carol and Andrea and Laurie just get some more personality. Laurie, her personality is pregnant and complaining. Andrea is, I can shoot really well and I'll follow you. Sophie is, I want to be Carl's girlfriend. Carol is, my husband abused me, but I have a new boyfriend now. Like, that's the personality of all of the characters, and I feel like the men just have such a better backstory, and they get more page time, and so I hope that improves. I have 2 more volumes here to talk about, 4 and 5. I'm going to go kind of quick through some of these check-ins because we have so many volumes to get to. We had people who were trying to take over the prison. Some of the prisoners who were there, more or less a zombie attack happened. Rick decides to kill the person who is in charge of this like uprising and trying to kick him out. He doesn't tell anyone. There was the N-word dropped, which yeesh, by one of the characters. He's one of the side characters that's not talked about, so it was very unnecessary, and I hate that. And one of the characters, Alan, he gets bitten later when they're going into different blocks in the prison to like clear things out. He gets bitten, and Rick decides to chop off his foot because he's like, well, he got bit in the ankle, so if we chop it off, then the bite won't kill him, and he should be able to stay alive. They're trying to figure out, like, how does this zombie virus actually work? So there was that. And then there was the least favorite part of this entire series so far. So Michonne, she's an awesome character. She comes in to the prison from outside. She's like, I would like to stay here. Please let me in. She wields a sword, which is awesome. And for some reason, she knows that Tyrese was a football player and seduces him, quote unquote. I mean, she does offer, but he doesn't say no. So they get together, and Carol catches them in it and just goes absolutely bonkers. At one point, Tyrese literally said, she tempted me. Michonne tempted me. What was I supposed to do? And it's the most annoying thing in the world. Like, a woman would not write that, I don't think. I hate the relationship. All of them, really. There's not one relationship that I'm rooting for, except for maybe Glenn and Maggie, but they have their own issues of just, I don't understand why they like each other. So that was awful. Then Carol kisses Rick and is basically like, I like you, and she's clearly in a fragile state. It ends with Rick and Tyrese getting in a fight, and the crux of this volume is, does Rick get to decide who lives and dies? And he is basically saying, we're in a new world, and we're going to need to kill people in order to live, people who are against us. And this is a theme that happens in the show as well. We want to be a community and we want to be safe, and we're going to kill everyone else in order to do it. So Rick is kind of showing that he is going off the rails a little. Dale and Herschel, when they wake up, they basically said, we've made a committee, you are no longer going to be the sole person in charge, and we're going to make choices together. So that's that volume. We're really focused on the relationships kind of falling apart and how people can be terrible to each other. And they did mention that there were no women on the committee, and it was hilarious because Rick goes, oh, there are no women on the committee, because it's like Rick, Tyrese, Dale, and Herschel, I think, are the 4 people on the committee. And he's like, yeah, they all voted for that. And it's like, I don't think Michonne voted for all men. Maggie doesn't seem like she would want people making choices for her. Andrea doesn't seem like she would want people making choices for her. The author says, I just think they want to be protected. And it's fine because Glenn also didn't want to be a part of the committee. It's really disappointing how badly the female characters are written in this, because they're awesome in the show. Volume 5, we're going to go through really quickly because it's very graphic, very violent, really hard to read. Trigger warnings for assault and violence. Glenn and Rick see a helicopter and they see it crash, and they want to go figure out who is in the helicopter. So they go and they find out these people from like another community have taken the people from the helicopter to the community. So they're going to the community because they want to, share resources, share information. Do they have this helicopter? Is it theirs? Like, they want to find out what's going on. Meanwhile, back at the prison, Carol is like, I want to marry Lori and Rick. And she tells Lori that, and Lori freaks out on her and is like, what are you talking about? I don't like you like that. Like, I don't know you. Things move so fast. None of these relationships are fleshed out. So Tyrese leaving her is like the worst thing in her life, the thing that puts her over the edge. And then she's like, Lori, I want to marry you and Rick. And it's like, what? So that was dumb. And Lori just basically reacts like, you weirdo, which not the nicest way to react, but also somewhat understandable because it doesn't make any sense for her character to be doing that. Back to Rick and Glenn and Michonne, who went to find the helicopter. They go to Woodbury, and Woodbury is run by the governor, and the governor is out of his mind. He's quite evil and violent. He runs these like fights at the town for entertainment where they have these zombies chained up and they slowly release the zombies, so they're getting closer and closer, and they have 2 people fight. It's not real fights, it's kind of like wrestling, like it's scripted. We find out that the governor has a little girl zombie, his daughter, who he keeps chained up and feeds her human pieces. Guess where the people from the helicopter went? To feed his daughter. He basically is like, I'm going to assault Michonne and basically torture Glenn and Rick until you tell me where you came from, because I know you came from somewhere probably with food and water and I want your resources. The rest of this novel is extremely graphic, not in what's shown per se, but what's implied, and it was really hard to read. If we get too much more of that, I don't know that I would be reading this much longer. I don't think I would make it through. That's kind of where we're at. There's someone at the very end who's gonna help Rick escape, and so presumably they're gonna get Glenn and Michonne and escape and be able to go back to the prison. I never want to say nothing like that should be in a book, but I don't know that this is the person to write that. It seems like it's put in there for shock value, And that's one thing I'm afraid of moving forward, because we have a lot left in this series. And if you just keep trying to up the ante with shock value, like, it's going to get gross and violent for the sake of violent. And so I don't know if I would continue reading much more if that's where it's going to go. Like, I want character depth. You can put the characters in tricky situations without torturing them. I'm here with some rapid fire wrap-ups of the next volumes. I have read 6, 7, 8, and 9, and I'm going to kind of give you some very quick thoughts because I need to be moving through these faster. Volume 6. This one was another extremely graphic volume. In this one, Michonne tortures the governor to get back at him, but doesn't kill him, which is important later on. Lori has Judith, her baby, and Carol decides to let a zombie attack her and kill her. So we've lost her, we've gained Judith. Michonne has tortured the governor. So the governor comes for revenge at the end of this one, shortly after Lori has her baby. In volume 8, the governor attacks with his people. He kind of gets them riled up against everyone at the prison. Some people leave. There was kind of one attack. The governor's people didn't realize that Rick and his crew were going to fight back. They ended up losing more people than they thought, so they kind of retreated to regroup. And in that time, Dale, Andrea, Maggie, and Glenn take Sophia and the 2 little boys, Alan's little boys, and they say, we're going to leave. We're going to take the RV and we're going to try to find somewhere safe because we just don't know that we can withstand another attack. So then those people leave. The governor comes back. Judith and Lori get shot. The governor ends up getting killed, and Rick and Carl are on the run. So that brings us up to the end of volume 8. It definitely felt like this big climactic moment of like, our time at the prison is done. We are moving on. We lost a lot of people. We lost Herschel and Billy and Patricia and Lori and Judith. In volume 9, Carl and Rick are together and they end up going back to the farm. They kind of head that way. Michonne catches up with them. So Michonne is still alive. She joins Carl and Rick. They go to the farm. They find out that that's where Maggie and Glenn and Dale and Andrea and the kids are. So those groups are all together, which I felt like was a little bit... Why split them up just to bring them like right back together in the next volume? But I guess it's fine. So Carl and Rick are pretty messed up. Losing Lori, obviously, and Judith is pretty traumatizing, and Rick just has totally lost his compass for decision making. He's like, I chose to stay at the prison with my family and look at where it got me, and I don't know if I can make any other decisions. They're at the farm, and 3 people come. There's an army guy. His name is Abraham. There's an army woman. I think her name is Rosalita. And then there is Eugene, who claims he's a scientist and knows the secret to what is happening and can fix the zombie apocalypse if Abraham and Rosalita can get him to Washington, D.C., and they've been on this mission. They have like a radio that they only turn on every 100 miles. And Eugene is clearly smart. He knows a lot of things. He's able to talk about it and basically convinces the group at the farm that we're going to be safer on the move because we're not going to get caught by just wandering zombies that eventually come upon us. And everyone at the farm, I think, is just devastated by what happened at the prison and kind of losing their home again, that they're like, at least this gives us something to do. So they are going on this mission with Eugene and Abraham and Rosalita to try to get to Washington, D.C. safely and hopefully figure out what's going on. Hello, I am back with another Walking Dead update. I am glad to say that I am starting to enjoy it more. I feel like the pace has slowed down quite a bit, and we're spending a little bit more time focused on our characters and what they're feeling, which is something I love about the show. So I'm really excited that that's where we're at. I am going to tell you about volumes 10 through 13. I've been focusing on this so much because I want to make sure I can finish it in October, and it's October 10th today, so I really needed to get going. So, volume 10, they come across Morgan, who is someone that Rick ran into in volume 1. Morgan joins the party. Then one of the most horrifying things happened in this. We have the twin boys who Andrea and Dale have kind of taken over since their parents died. And we knew that something weird was going on with one of the boys. He was like weirdly interested by some of the dead animal carcasses that they came across. Well, he kind of snapped and he ended up killing his brother, but saying it was okay because his brother was going to come back. So clearly something was wrong with his brain. Like, he didn't understand death, which I guess it makes sense. If you're very young and the dead come back to life and that is just normal life, your brain would get messed up about what is actually death. So they found the one boy, Ben, and they locked him up, and they were like, what do we do with him? Like, we don't have access to a therapist to help us. Like, we can't lock him up. Well, Carl overhears, and he takes his gun and takes care of the problem in the middle of the night when no one is watching, and doesn't tell anyone about it. But he just overheard that and thought, I can help in this situation. And so we're also seeing Carl and like how these kids are not okay. These kids are being brought up in these situations where killing is praised and celebrated because they're doing it to survive, but they're starting to kind of blur these lines between what is right, and Carl is way too young to be making these decisions, but he wants to be an adult because he feels like he needs to be grown up in this situation. They meet Father Gabriel, but we shortly find out that he locked himself in his church while the people in his congregation pounded on the doors asking for help, and he didn't help them, so he kind of hates himself. So there's this other party that ends up kidnapping Dale, and we find out that they are cannibals, and they are planning to eat Dale one bite at a time, or one bit at a time. So they cut off one of his legs, ate that. He's still alive. They're just keeping him in the camp, and they're just going to like eat him piece by piece, but they want to keep him alive because they don't have refrigerators, so they don't want him to die, which is just horrifying. And so the rest of the gang finds Dale, and they wipe out the entire group of cannibals. We're starting to see this very like us versus them mentality, which is coming back later as well, where Rick is just kind of starting to draw the line between, if there's any sort of conflict, it is us against you, and we're gonna wipe you out. In volume 12, we find out that Eugene was lying. He was a high school science teacher, so he is very smart, but that radio he was using never had any batteries. He was never in communication with Washington, D.C. He's just guessing because he's scared that he won't survive. He's like, I don't have the skills to survive. I'm not strong. I'm a coward. And so I just tried to find the strongest people I could and convince them to protect me. Everyone was pretty mad at him for that, but kind of understood what was happening. And then Eric and Aaron, these two guys, show up. They are recruiters for a community. There's supposedly a community nearby that is looking for people to join them. And Eric and Aaron have been tailing them and watching them and believe that these are good people who they can bring into their community. So they decide to take a chance. They're interviewed by a congressman. His name is Douglas. He's the one in charge. Apparently Washington, D.C. had this like community that was like totally solar powered and had a food stock for like a whole year for all the people in the community. The congressman knew about it, and he has been finding people. They fenced it in, so there are walls all around it, and they're slowly like moving the wall one piece at a time to like add more houses into this community as they add more people. So the group joins them and everyone's having a really hard time adjusting. They say no guns allowed. Well, Rick does not like that, so he and Glenn actually steal the guns back and they're holding on to them. They're each given like a job that kind of fits what they're already good at. So Rick is actually given the job of being the first policeman and Michonne is kind of like a deputy. So in the community, we find that things are not as peachy keen as they might be. Like, it's weird because everyone has a hard time adjusting because it's like there's a dinner party and they're like in nice clothes, having showered, like having small talk, and they're kind of like freaking out about this because they're like, I just don't know. It feels like we're all playing pretend. Like, I don't know how to do this anymore. I'm used to being on the run for my life, scared of everything, and now we're at a dinner party? Like, it's super weird. But then when Rick is doing some policing, he finds out that one of the men is abusing his wife and child. So Rick confronts him, but he's not used to confronting people like a normal human. He is used to battering people and forcing them to do what he wants. At first, Congressman Douglas is against this, but then when they separate the man from his wife and child, he gets upset and in a rage brings a knife and tries to attack Rick for breaking up his marriage. So then Rick tries to handle it peacefully as much as he can. Douglas wants to keep this man alive because this man is a doctor. So he's like, he has valuable knowledge. And Rick is kind of like, I'm afraid for all of us and his wife. We can't just keep people alive because they do something important. Like, we can't rate the importance of lives in this community. And so Douglas ends up saying, do what you need to do, and Rick ends up shooting this guy. So we now have Douglas talking to Rick and being like, I think you might be what this community needs. I don't know that I'm strong enough to do what needs to be done. And Rick is very much like, I will do it whether you want me to or not. Like, you don't get to talk to me about what's going to happen. I get to choose that. So we've had a lot of really interesting things happening around this community. This trying to go back to normal life is really hard, and they're just finding that they've changed a lot. And Michonne is really worried for Rick. She's worried that he's gone off his rocker and he might be a danger to the people around them and this community. Hello, I wanted to give an update because I have finished Compendium 2, which is quite a feat because these things are massive. I've started on the first volume of Compendium 3, so I am officially halfway through. I've read 2 compendiums, I have 2 left, so we are halfway through. I'm feeling a lot better about this series. There are still issues that I'm having, but I feel like we're slowing down. We're taking time to really dig into the characters. I will say, I feel like we're still digging into the male characters' aspects a lot more. I feel like we're not getting a lot of depth on most of the female characters. They have very little time in the book. And when we are with them, they're often interacting with other characters. And so we're not getting a huge depth of their personality and what they're thinking and what they're dealing with. But the male characters, we are getting a lot more. And a lot happened. And I'm just trying to summarize the really important parts. So Douglas, the leader of the community, he ends up dying. There's a breach in the wall. A bunch of walkers gets through. He ends up dying. In the chaos of that happening, Carl gets shot. He gets shot through part of his face. So he has lost an eye, has had some brain damage and some memory loss, but is overall okay. Rick is now sort of informally in charge of the community. And his goal is to make this a safe community. If we all work together, we have the power to stop a zombie invasion. And he's starting to envision a world where they could maybe eradicate all of the zombies and live in relative peace and kind of rebuild the world. So they come across a guy named Jesus who's from this other community called Hilltop. He invites Rick and a couple other people to go there to sort of establish like a trade between the communities. Well, when Rick goes there, they find out that there's this group of people led by a man named Negan, which if you've seen the show, Negan is one of the most despicable villains of all time. He's awful and terrible in the best way, like a very well-written villain. And Negan is taking half of what Hilltop produces. They have like a farm, and Negan is taking half of what they produce. And they found out that there were also 2 other communities that Negan is doing this to, taking the things that they produce. And Negan is saying, we'll protect you against the zombies. But really it's like, you're going to do as we say because we're strong and we will, take things by force and by murder if we need to. Rick is like, they at the community, they don't have a lot of food. But they're like, we know how to survive, and we know how to fight. So what if we take down Negan, and then you give us half of what you produce? And so their plan is to take on Negan and his force in exchange for supply from the Hilltop and this community of, we're going to work together. Negan's company finds out about this, and Abraham gets shot by one of Negan's men. Maggie is pregnant. We did find that out. And her and Glenn are going to go with Sophia. They're going to go live at Hilltop. They want to go live there because there's almost like 200 people there. So Glenn is like, it's going to feel a lot safer when we're there. Carl is worrying Rick quite a bit because they're finding out that Carl is not able to be a child. He's had to grow up too fast, and there's a lot of darkness there in Carl. And Rick is also realizing that about himself. Like, he doesn't know how to just be a normal human. If something threatens him, he will attack without question. He will murder someone without question if he thinks it's threatening him. And he's just having to kind of come to terms with, am I an okay person? Like, have I lost the thread? Can I even tell right and wrong apart? Or is it just all self-preservation at this point? And I think it's such an interesting conversation to think about because, yeah, he's been in this fight or flight mode for now, how many months? Like, since this all started, it's just been, you need to stay alive. And they've come across a lot of awful people, but they've come across some good people. And he's afraid that he can't really tell the difference. And that if anyone pushes back against him and what he wants, that he's just going to retaliate with violence. And so it's really interesting because we're going to have Negan, who's this awful, awful, awful villain character, and Rick, who in some ways are not that different. And I just think it's really fascinating kind of seeing Rick trying to fight against being a villain, but also needing to be the villain in order to be the hero for his people. I'm back with another Walking Dead update. I am almost a third of the way through this chunky boy. I'm really enjoying this. Things are pretty tense. So we have met Negan. Negan, in his first appearance in the graphic novel series, kills one of our characters from the beginning, Glenn. Glenn is no longer with us. He is the only one that Negan harms, at least at this moment. Negan knows that Rick is in charge, and he's just like, I'm just going to do just enough to the people that you care about to break you so that you fall in line, because everyone else will fall in line if you do. Negan is a very smart villain. He knows how to manipulate a situation to benefit him. So Rick goes back to the community and says, we need to do what Negan says. When Negan ends up killing Glenn, there's like 50 armed, they call them the Saviors. That's what Negan's group call themselves because they're saving people from the zombies. They're the protection. And Rick is just like, we need to do as the Saviors say. We need to give half of all our supplies to them. We need to just fall in line. This is just how it is. We can't stand up against them. But secretly, he is planning an attack. He's still planning to try to wipe out Negan. Jesus ends up following Negan's group at some point and figures out where Negan lives. Figure out that they're maybe running low on ammunition, so they may stand a chance. And then Jesus also puts them in contact with with the Kingdom, which is another community run by a guy who calls himself King Ezekiel. He has a pet tiger named Shiva, and he's very over the top. They like have this whole like knights and kingdom thing at their community. And it's kind of strange and quirky, but fun in like a comic book way. So King Ezekiel has wanted to take down Negan for a long time. Negan actually doesn't take supplies from the Kingdom because he sort of can't. He doesn't feel strong enough to go after the Kingdom. And so there's now a truce sort of between the Hilltop, the Kingdom, and Rick's community to try to take down Negan. So we have our Rick kind of starting this war against Negan and the Saviors, and they're going to try to take them down. Eugene found supplies to start helping make bullets, so that will help because they know that people are running out of ammunition, including Negan's group. So we will see how things go. Things are getting pretty tense, and I don't really remember exactly how things shake out with Negan in the end. I know how things end up, and I'm going to be really curious to see if they do something different, because I know Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who plays Negan in the show, is very popular, and they kind of kept him around, I think, longer than they should have. So I'm interested to see if Negan has, like, an end, like a hard stop in the books, or if it kind of drags out the way it does in the show. Ezekiel's group lost in this attack against the outpost, and he lost Shiva, which was so sad and so devastating. And then we have Maggie, who has sort of taken over control of Hilltop from Gregory, which is awesome because she's been a character who really hasn't had a lot of, like, stuff that she's trying to do, and finally she's a character that's doing something more than just being a mom to Sophia. And so she basically confronted Gregory, said, "You're a coward. I believe in Rick and what Rick is doing. We can't just take this from Negan forever. Like, we can't live this way. Like, I know Rick will get us to where we need to be." Then after a couple days, the group that Ezekiel didn't wipe out, they went and helped clear up the zombies, which were outside of Negan's stronghold. I thought that was a little convenient because, like, there were a lot of zombies there, like hundreds of them. And so it was kind of annoying that the author's just like, they just, like, cleared them up. Like, it's kind of frustrating from a narrative standpoint. Like, we know how damaging these zombies outbreaks can be, and you're telling us that, like, they just shot them all? Oh yeah, they're supposed to have, like, not a lot of bullets, but they just keep on coming. It's kind of annoying in some ways that they just dispatch with them so quickly. Negan comes after a couple days. He brings a bunch of his people, they bring grenades, and they blow up a bunch of the community. Not that many people die. Their doctor dies. One guy loses a limb. One of the other guys gets shot. None of our main characters. And eventually Negan has to retreat. They do enough Maggie actually brings some people from the hilltop to come help out, and when everyone sees the damage that's been done, they're like, this community is no longer viable. We're going to all go to the hilltop together. They're trying to figure out, how do we take down Negan once and for all? One issue is that Negan found and caught Eugene, who had been making bullets, and he's going to try to force him to make bullets for them. Eugene finds out that there's a guy, Dwight, who is one of Negan's right-hand men, and Dwight he hates Negan. Negan is not a nice person. He's not a nice leader. And this guy, either Negan, like, killed his wife or took his wife or something, did something to his wife. And this guy hates Negan and would kill him if he could. He just feels like, if I kill him, everyone else will kill me, and then where will we be? Dwight is going to try to help from the inside, and so maybe he can help Eugene escape. I will say these past couple volumes have gotten a little tiring. I don't particularly love reading all the action scenes, and a lot of these have just been like grenades exploding. Like, it's not that visually interesting to look at, and lots of little battles and skirmishes where it seems like not a lot happens to like move the plot forward. And so I'm hoping that it gets a little better in the next couple volumes. I'm also really like excited to see the end of Negan. He's getting very tiresome. Like, he talks a lot. Every other word he says is a bad word. He's huge potty mouth. And he's a raging sexist. So many things that he does are sexist. And he gets kind of tiresome. And that's the thing. A great villain can be very tiresome. And he gets a lot of page time. And it was really good in the beginning. And I feel like he just says he's going to do all this like evil stuff. But he doesn't really deliver on it all the time. Recently, at least. And so it's hard because it's like, as the author, are you backing down? Like, you said this guy was a horrible villain. Are we just backing off of that? Like, you can't just drag him out indefinitely. Like, we need to see him continue to be awful, to continue to want him to be taken down. But we don't want to see him, like, doling out empty promises, I guess is what I'm saying. I hope that he doesn't continue to just linger on, kind of ready for his time to be done, because I do think that the longer he's on screen, the less potent he gets as a villain. Okay, I have finished Compendium 3 and wanted to give you kind of my final thoughts and sum up what happened. The big thing that has happened is they have come across this group of people who skins zombies and wears the skins of the zombies like over their faces and bodies. And it's this weird group that they are kind of like, we are like animals. We need to not be humans anymore. We need to act like animals. So they just wander around with the zombie herds wearing the zombie skins so that they don't get noticed, and that's how they live. They just kind of eat off the land. If the zombies kill things, they will share food with the zombies. It's very strange. And I don't know how I feel about this as like the next antagonist, the next enemy to be defeated. They are very much like, we have our land, and they don't want Rick's people spreading out any further. And Carl ends up falling in love with a girl who's part of this group. She gets captured by Hilltop, and they eventually release her. They do like a hostage exchange with this other group, and Carl goes after her. Her name is Lydia, and she doesn't actually like it in the group. She is mistreated in there, and her mother is the leader. Her mother eventually says, you should take her. We can't protect her here. So they take her. but the group of these, they call themselves whisperers because they whisper a lot so the zombies can't hear them. And the whisperers end up killing a whole bunch of people and literally placing their heads on spikes in this like line to kind of mark their territory, and it's kind of like, don't cross here. One of those people was Ezekiel, which is so sad. And that's where it ended. So we'll kind of see what happens next. I felt like they went really quick with the Whisperers, trying to make them this big bad, and it's kind of like we learned too much about them too quickly, so they weren't as mysterious as maybe they could have been. So I'm not vibing too much with them as like the big bad, but it is interesting. They kind of control the zombies. Like one threat that the woman, her name is Alpha, that's what she calls herself anyways, she shows Rick that her group controls like thousands of zombies, like a massive herd, and she's like, my people can kind of keep them in line, but if you try to turn on us and don't do as we say, we will turn this herd of thousands of zombies upon you. And so they definitely seem big and mysterious, but I think we maybe found out too much about them too quickly. So I don't know if they are going to be the main villain in this last compendium or if there's going to be more to come, but I am excited to be picking up the final one and see how this all wraps up. Update time. So I'm about a quarter to maybe almost a third of the way through the final compendium, and I was kind of right, I think, at what I was thinking at the end of the previous compendium, which is that the Whisperers aren't all that interesting now that we know about them. They basically hide within these herds of dead people and then attack people from inside them, and it's honestly not all that interesting. Negan was taken out of his prison cell by one of the sons of the people that the Whisperers had killed. He thought that Rick wasn't doing enough, and a lot of people thought that way, and he was like, well, I'll take Negan out and we'll tell the Whisperers the plan for no reason. It was really dumb. It didn't make sense why he would be doing that. Anyways, Negan then escapes with this kid Brandon and kills Brandon, and then goes on to sort of join the Whisperers. He joins the Whisperers for like a week and ends up killing Alpha and bringing her head back to Rick. He's trying to earn Rick's trust. I'm guessing that the author wants us to think that Negan wants to live in society. It's hard to trust him after everything that happened, so we feel the same way Rick does. It's going to be hard to earn trust, and I still don't really trust it. The Whisperers, now that they have had their leader murdered, are waging full war on everyone, and we are in a major war scene scenes that just keep dragging on, and it's not that interesting. It's just a lot of zombies being mowed down and these little battle scenes, and it's really boring to read as a graphic novel. I think this is one of those times where it'd maybe be more interesting if I was like reading about it, but just looking at it is not interesting. I can't see any more little scenes of gunfire shooting into zombies. Nothing crazy has happened in the battle, except for there's a lot of zombies. They don't really know how many Whisperers there are. That's about it. I don't feel like we're in danger. That's one of the things with these like big war things. It's hard to feel like these characters are really in danger. We lost Father Gabriel. It's fine. He's barely been in this, so I don't feel connected to him at all. Lydia, she basically told Rick, she told Carl, I don't love you. So she was kind of breaking Carl's heart, and that was a little bit sad. The most intriguing thing that is happening right now, and I'm hoping that this is where kind of the final parts of this season goes, is Eugene got a radio working, and he has been sort of calling out over radio waves, trying to contact other people. And he finally found someone who was on the radio, and they started talking. And at first, they were very much like, we'll just try to meet up here every day when we can, talk to each other. But they were both very much like, we're not going to tell the leaders of our group. We're going to keep it between the two of us and try to earn some trust. So as they've been talking, they've told each other their names. So Eugene has told her, my name is Eugene. And she said her name is Stephanie. And then Eugene finally told him, we're east of Washington, D.C., we're near the coast. And she finally was like, we live in Ohio. Maybe we're going to get to start connecting like the actual whole United States. Like we already have these 4. We have Hilltop and the Sanctuary. That's where the Saviors were, and I guess still are. Alexandria and the Kingdom. So we already have these like 4 communities working together, and it would be exciting to see like, can the world get rebuilt? Can we get rid of the zombies? That's something that's also kind of intriguing to me, is the thought of how many zombies would actually be left. Like, our 4 groups have been killing zombies in this area for such a long time that it gets kind of hard to imagine that there would be many more left. Like, it's been years that they've been like slowly branching out and killing off zombies, and yet the Whisperers like have this huge herd. And so it just kind of makes you question, like, there are kind of a finite amount of people that were in the United States. I'm assuming there aren't that many babies, and so, and I doubt there's like people flying in on airplanes like replenishing the population. So it's just kind of like, at some point things would be cleared out. And it also makes me think, like, why wouldn't you just try to get an airplane and like fly to someplace like Ireland that would be like smaller, and you could just wipe out like all the zombies and then just live on an island for the rest of your life. Like, I don't know, interesting thoughts that I've been having. So I'm not loving it. I don't love the war, but it's where we're at, and I'm hoping we're gonna get past it soon. And then maybe that, like, finding out about new groups is so interesting. Okay, quick update, because I had been talking about how they just kind of quickly dealt with the one herd. Well, there was an ambush at the hilltop. They burned a lot of the hilltop. Most of the people, pretty much everyone we knew, survived. Again, I feel like that's gotten a little frustrating. Like, I don't feel like we're losing people. And maybe because they're like saving it for like the finale of the series, I don't know. But we're not really losing people we care about. The groups come back to Alexandria and go, we did it. We got rid of, the dead that they had gathered, and we took them out. And Rick goes, well, how many did they have? Because he had said they had hundreds of them. And the guy was like, oh, it was a lot of them. It was like 1,000. And Rick goes, oh my gosh, I saw thousands of them when Alpha showed me them. And so then we find out that the Whisperers have basically gathered like all of the dead, the thousands of them, and have kind of got them walking in the direction towards Alexandria. Okay, apparently tonight I'm just doing rapid fire updates. So many things just happened. So the Saviors, for some reason, are deciding to turn against everyone else, which is dumb because there's like 3 other communities. And so as this huge, massive herd is coming in, they are kind of coming in after the herd has been kind of led away somewhat. There's groups from the different communities that are like leading them towards the ocean, because the ocean is loud enough that the zombies are following it and falling into the ocean. And for some reason, the saviors are turning on them again, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Though I'm wondering if it's just for Negan's backstory, because Negan, in this one, he and Rick started working together to fight against the zombies and like have saved one another. And so I wonder if maybe Negan getting the saviors to settle back down will be kind of his redeeming point. Andrea and Eugene were working to take the herd and lure it towards the ocean, and Eugene falls off his horse. He's exhausted. He's been working like overtime trying to get the bullets ready, and they make it out, but Andrea was bit on her neck. So we know that you can't, cut it off, like the bite has happened. And that's so sad, because her and Rick this whole time have had this like little saying that they say together of like, we don't die, we survive, we're the survivors, we don't die. And now he's gonna lose her, and that's really, really sad. So I'm hoping that maybe there's some situation to which she's immune or something, and she's gonna live, because it's gonna be so heartbreaking. So Andrea died, and it was really sad. And Rick is at this point where he's barely hanging on. He's not even that old. It said he was 38, so he's not even that old, but he's just been through so much, and now losing Andrea, he's just kind of losing his will to go on. And she kind of gives him a pep talk before she dies of like, look at what you've done. You've made an oasis in this horrible world, and you're going to continue doing that without me, because it's what we do, and we just keep on living. And it was so great, because after he almost lets her bite him, but he ends up killing her. So she's no longer living, but she was a zombie. So she's no longer undead, and he walks outside, and everyone's there. Carl and Michonne and a bunch of people, and they just rally around him. They know what he's going through, and it's just so nice to see that even though he's losing his love, he still has so many people there to support him, so he can do it. He doesn't have to be strong. He just needs to be there for people, and people will be there for him. And that's like the beauty of community in this world. And now we're at a point where Negan is trying to talk down the saviors. I kind of figured that was going to happen, and I don't love it, but they want to keep Negan around. And I have to say, I kind of like nice Negan. Like, I liked it when he and Rick were working together, and so I'm okay with him being good. I just wish they weren't like shoehorning in this savior rebellion to like make that happen. They didn't need that. Like, him and Rick like working together and fighting together was enough. I'm in completely uncharted territory. I have no idea where we're going, so I'm just really intrigued at what's gonna happen and how this is all gonna end. So to update you, the Whisperers have all been taken care of for the most part. Dwight from the Saviors and his little army that he's been training pretty much wiped them out. There has been a small question from Maggie about whether or not like things are actually settled with them, because she also is kind of like, things happened a little easily. Like, there were tons of them and they just wiped them out. So I don't know. I'm hoping that they're done, but I also feel like it wrapped up and finished a little too easily. So I'm not sure how I feel about that fully, but we have shifted our focus onto a few plot points. So we have Rick, who's missing Andrea and trying to uphold the community at Alexandria. And we have Eugene, who's made contact with Stephanie. Well, Stephanie finally agrees to let them meet up. And so our group from Alexandria, Michonne and Eugene and a couple other people head out to where this group says, we'll meet with you here, we'll talk, we'll see if we'll let you in. So they go there, and there are these well-armed soldiers. They look like stormtroopers, and they meet up with them, and this lady, Pamela, she is like the governor of the Commonwealth, is what they call it, and she decides to trust them. One of the reasons that she does that is because Michonne notices on this big board that they have outside of the Commonwealth with all these papers on it of people where it's like, if you've seen, this person, come here, from people from the Commonwealth. And she sees her daughter is looking for her and says, come to the bakery. And so eventually Pamela decides to trust them enough to reunite them. And it was so beautiful seeing Michonne united with one of her daughters. One of them didn't make it, but one of them did. Her name is Elodie. And it's so nice seeing them together. So the way the Commonwealth works is that Pamela is a very annoying, hoity-toity rich person, and she thinks that whatever job you had in your previous life before all this went down, that's the job you should have. So if you were a baker in your previous life, you're a baker in the Commonwealth. If you were a doctor before, you're a doctor now, construction worker, military, whatever. And you are provided supplies and accommodations in accordance with how important your job is. So Michonne is offered a place to stay because she was a lawyer in a previous life, and she is offered a ton of wealth, like this beautiful house that's massive, and basically anything she wants. She can eat at fancy restaurants. She can have the best wine and snacks. Pamela leaves Michonne there and goes back with the rest of the group to meet the different communities, the Hilltop, the Kingdom, and Alexandria, and kind of talk with Rick and see if they can kind of bring those communities into their network. Well, Rick and his crew obviously aren't in love with the whole class structure that Pamela has going on. And so they're a little bit at a standoff at this point. She looks around. She's very impressed by what they have. She's very impressed with Eugene and how smart he is and all the things that he's made. But they just have this conflict of Rick going, I have the same chores as everyone else. I live in the same house size as everyone else. Like, we are equals here. We all put in the work. We all get an equal share. And she doesn't agree with that. And so we're coming to this butting of heads where, how are we going to figure this out? The Commonwealth, I should say a little bit about it, is they are extremely advanced for a community. They have like 50,000 members. They have football games. They have paved roads that they can escort people along. It's about as close to normal life as you can get. Very well fortified cities with soldiers, like a full functioning army. So they're very well advanced, and my fear is that Pamela is going to come in and like take over things, but as we know, Rick won't let that happen. So Rick is going to go back to the Commonwealth and talk with Pamela and see if they can come to some sort of agreement about how this network, Alexandria, Hilltop, and the Kingdom, and the Sanctuary, like how are they all going to join in on the Commonwealth. Negan has settled. He has been kind of outcast. He's not allowed to live with the communities, and he's living on his own, and we've got a little glimpse of him kind of settling into this lonely life. He's actually where he buried his wife after she had died, and he talks to her a lot, and he planted a sunflower on her grave, and it's kind of sweet, and I almost find myself hoping he comes back more. It's such whiplash. I don't know how they made me like do such a 180 on Negan, but I almost wish he didn't have to live such a sad life. He's very sorry about what he's done and kind of seen that he wasn't doing things for the good of people, even though he felt that that's what he had to do. So I kind of want to see more of him. I want to see him be fully reformed. It's sad to see him living such an outcast life, and he kind of wants to die, because what kind of life is that, just being an outcast on your own forever? It's pretty sad. All right, I wanted to give a quick update on what's happening. Things are moving a little bit too quickly for my taste. We've kind of reverted back to that, just keep the plot moving very quickly. And I know he's trying to wrap up this graphic novel series. We have Pamela, the governor of the Commonwealth, and the people are turning against her. And Dwight wanted to side with the people. He was like, we can take things over. The people will be on our side. We have them. We have a lot of strength. Why don't we just take over the Commonwealth and then we can, run it? And it got to a point where Rick was like, we're not going to take this place by force. We're going to, change their minds about how they run things. And it got so bad that Rick was like, Dwight is dangerous. He's riling people up, and he shoots Dwight. He kind of blames Michonne for it, which wasn't very nice because it wasn't really her fault. She's kind of been wrapped up on the wrong side of things because she was supposedly going to be representing a guard who had really badly beat up a civilian who had attacked him. And I thought that was a little half-baked because they just kind of dropped the whole lawyer thing, or they have at this point. So I don't really know where Michonne fits in this. We have basically at this point, with Dwight's death, and then Mercer is a guard for Pamela, who was put under arrest because he started talking about maybe revolting and he got caught. He was just freed by people, and they are coming to get Pamela. I just think a lot is happening, and I think it gets tiring that, Rick's community is the only community that does things well. The Saviors, their community was messed up. Hilltop had Gregory in charge, and he was kind of worthless, but I guess it was a fine community. The Kingdom was okay. But it's every other community that they come across, the Whisperers, it's messed up. The Commonwealth, it's messed up. The Saviors, it was messed up. And it just gets kind of tiring. Why is Rick's community the only community that's doing it right? I just don't buy it that so many places would be so awful. And I think it could be more interesting to have less of this, again, huge battles, big action sequences. I feel like we could just rest in the characters and what they're doing. I feel like that would be interesting. It doesn't really feel like a true revolt. I'm not feeling the feelings that this place is so awful and that these people have been oppressed and stuff like that. We just haven't had enough time to build that world up. Oh no, this is so frustrating. So now, Rick helped Pamela get out of the city because the people were all riled up, and he is trying to minimize the situation. So a herd of zombies ends up coming through the town. They're really worried about it, but luckily Maggie had brought people from the hilltop because she was worried about the whole situation with Rick. Well, then Pamela brings the army from the town that she had gone to, brings them back. Maggie has cleared out the herd of zombies, and Pamela then is like, you were trying to take things over, Rick. So it's literally like the miscommunication trope in a romance novel where it doesn't make sense and it's dumb. And she's like, attack! And it's just, it doesn't make sense narratively why she would be jumping to conclusions. Yes, she's not a good ruler. Yes, she's jumping to conclusions. But it's quite far to be like, we're taking things over when Rick just saved your life. I don't know. It's kind of dumb. This might be my last update before I finish it because I'm on the last section, but I just read to a part where Pamela's son, Sebastian, he's very obnoxious and entitled and thinks that the town owes him and should, just let him lead and everything. And he ends up coming to Rick's room in the middle of the night with a gun and ends up killing him. Carl goes to his dad's room in the morning, and his dad is there, has turned into a zombie, and he kills Rick. So we are following Carl, and he's kind of reeling from the fact that Rick gave his life to making life so much safer for the people around him and just dies. We are now following Carl and Sophia. Years and years later, they're both grown-ups at this point, and it looks like they live out in a little farmhouse kind of away from people, and it seems like maybe there aren't a lot of zombies around anymore, and I'm excited to see how it wraps up, but I'm also really sad. It was really sad to lose Rick, and I think it was the right time. He kind of got to give this big speech about, how to make good choices moving forward, and I'm excited to see how this all finishes. All right, welcome to the end. I have finished the entirety of the Walking Dead graphic novel series. That last section with Carl grown up, it was almost like a little short story just about him and his daughter, how safe people are now, and him missing his dad, but also being so grateful for sacrificing what he did and making the world what it is. And there was like a little bit of conflict, but I didn't think I need to get into it. It was just there to make that point about Rick and, remembering the sacrifices that Rick and other people had made to kind of get them through the zombie times. And there are still zombies in this world, but they have enough safety and enough people working together that they can have these safe zones where kids can grow up and not even know what a zombie looks like. So I thought it was a sweet ending, nothing spectacular. I think the real heavy hitter part was Rick dying, and this just needed to kind of have that falling action to kind of wrap everything up. So I enjoyed doing this series. I think overall I'd probably give the Walking Dead series a 3.5 to a 4, which is weird because there are so many parts that I really loved, but there were quite a few sections that just don't work. I think the hardest parts were when things felt shoehorned in, when conflict felt like it didn't make sense. And I think had they slowed down and really built up tension, that's gonna help make everything more believable. So I would be interested to read more. I don't know if Robert Kirkman has done anything else. If he's written anything else, I might have to go look that up. I would love to know if you enjoy spoiler vlogs. It's something that I'm a little torn on because obviously giving spoilers, you're cutting out a certain amount of people who don't want to be spoiled because they haven't read it. But then I always kind of enjoy when I have read something, listening to someone's spoiler reviews, getting into the nitty gritty of everything. I enjoy that, so sometimes I search it out. So it's kind of like this balancing act. I'm always happy to try and do more of these. I enjoy sharing my full thoughts and not having to tiptoe around the details. I like being able to just spill all my ideas out there. So if you want more spoiler vlogs, please let me know. Have you read or watched The Walking Dead? What do you think of kind of the comparisons between the two and how they turned out? I think that Carol will still always be my favorite Walking Dead character, and I love her so much in the show, and I actually need to Google what happens to her because she has such a different storyline in here that I'm wondering what happens to her in the show. Thank you for sticking with me this long if you have made it. I appreciate you watching and joining me on this crazy long journey and this crazy long video. Bye.